morning. Let there be light. There it is. Oh, I'm Jonathan Bissick, church planting resident, and 2023 is not far away where there will be a new church in Olathe, new city, Olathe. I'm super excited. Yeah. So I'm going to add to the gratitude. Not only did you give $256,000 last Sunday, in addition to that, several in this room were contributed to Olathe and added another $16,516 on top of that. Yeah. To see what God is going to do to reach not just this church area in Shawnee, but a new city in every city in Kansas City. That's what we're a part of, and that's awesome. And I want to say this as well. This time last year, Jen and I and our family were a little bit spiritually homeless. We had no idea what God had in store for us, and he brought us to New City. Like many of you, maybe your story is the same, and we found a family that has taken us in, has loved us, and has become one with us, and is now a part of us as we head to Olathe in this next year. And so we're blessed by Pastor Matt and Jen and you guys as well, and the whole church family. Thank you for letting us be part of your family. Thank you for welcoming us home. This is like, as we came into the Thanksgiving season, like we just had this awesome peace that we have this amazing family. So we're so grateful we get to be a part of your family this year as I get to kick off Christmas. Now, I'll be honest with you, we are not an early Christmas decorator in our home. We do not start in Halloween putting up the Christmas tree. Some of you are guilty of that. Yeah. I think there's probably just this desire to have Christmas a little bit longer, but I'm that way when it comes to like ice cream. Like you eat that one and then you think, this is so good, let's eat a second one, and you kind of ruin the moment because it's too much. So thank you for those who have already ruined the moment. We waited till the day after Thanksgiving. Our tree is up. It's decorated. We're in there. I love Christmas. Gifts are my thing, so I will be celebrating. I get to kick this off. I just don't do it too early because I don't want to spoil the moment. So we're going to talk about looking for Jesus over the next several weeks. We're going to use the characters of the Christmas story, and we're going to discover 4 different ways that someone finds Jesus in the gospel. Everyone is looking for something. As we navigate through this series, we're going to help each other point people to Jesus in the gospel and to encourage us to invite our friends and family to come and see. And even as I say that, I want to go ahead and plant a seed in you to begin to pray and to think about who is it that I can invite to be with me on Christmas Eve at one of our 2 Christmas Eve services here at our campus. I heard this statistic for years. I've now worked 20 plus years in church ministry, and they always say that the reason that people don't come to church is no one invites them, and that it's like, I don't know, almost 100%, like 90-something%. If you invite them, they come. And so I had the opportunity over this last year as I stepped out of just working in a church and working at Amazon and working in the handyman and doing all the things I do. Every person I've invited has come. So it's actually, I put the statistic to the test. So I want you to think about who is it as you hear about what we're going to talk about today, and as God begins to work in your heart and the things that the Christmas story reminds us of, who is it that I can invite to be a part of Christmas Eve that can hear the gospel, to come and see for themselves? If you have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Luke chapter 2. I got the best characters of the Christmas story. There's going to be more characters shared throughout the series, but I got the main characters. I got Jesus. I got the best one. And his parents, they're also main characters too, but I get to share about Jesus. I'm sure the others will talk about Jesus, but just I'm pointing out my character this week. In Luke chapter 2, I'm going to read starting in verse 1. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that the whole empire should be registered. This first registration took place while Quirinius was governing Syria. So everyone went to be registered, each to his own town. Joseph also went up from the town of Nazareth in Galilee to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and the family line of David, to be registered along with Mary, who was engaged to him and was pregnant. While they were there, the time came for her to give birth. Then she gave birth to her firstborn son, and she wrapped him tightly in a cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no guest room available for him. I want to talk to you today about looking for Jesus, those who make no room for him. Let's pray. God, we thank you that we get to celebrate what you've already done with this Seek offering last Sunday and this anticipation of what 2023 holds for us as a church, that we're going to see many come to your kingdom, not just here in Shawnee, but across our campuses and even our new campus that will take place in Olathe. God, we are so grateful for what you have already done and what you're going to do. And today, even as we just read verses that for many of us are so familiar that we kind of just gloss over and that, we check the box that we're hearing the Christmas story. I pray, Father, that you would allow your Son to speak to us through your word, that we would slow down and that we would hear what you're saying to us today. Open our understanding to your word, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. So, as we look at this idea of those who make no room for Jesus, I'll ask the question, who are they? Who are the ones that make no room for Jesus? Maybe you'll find that that's yourself today or someone you know. As we said earlier, that'll be a person that God drops in your heart that you can invite to come and encourage to come and see. So through our text in Luke, I want to point to 3 reasons why someone would not make room for Jesus. I'll tell you what they are and then I'll go back through them together with you. And they are these reasons. They don't trust him, number 1. They don't want him messing up their plans, number 2. And number 3, they don't want him to overstay his welcome. So as we look at these 3 reasons, I'll submit to you that these are the very reasons why we should actually make room for Jesus. So here's the first one. They don't trust him. We read in Luke 2 in the first 5 verses about this census and what was happening. And here's what's going on. There are individuals, maybe it's ourselves, that don't believe that God is in full control. Now, they trust him with some things, but not all things. And all of us have had a reason to look at what God does or what we think he doesn't do, and we wrestle with him being trustworthy. If we're honest, we've all been in that place. Why does God allow certain things into our life, or why do bad things happen? This is one of the biggest reasons why those we know, friends and coworkers and maybe even family members or ourselves, don't make room for Jesus because they don't trust that he's in control. Again, this morning, I've said this in the past, I'm not going to be able to provide you, bless you. Woo. You're awake now. I'm not able to provide you a full theological answer to the question of why for everything. I've told you we have Jacob, our associate minister. He's a resident theologian. You can schedule an appointment with him, and he will answer that question for you. Or you can remember Numbers 23:19. If you don't know what that is, you can ask somebody. They can tell you about Numbers 23:19. But I'll say this. I'll quote my favorite man-crush preacher, Charles Spurgeon, again. I'm probably going to just be stuck on him every time you hear me talk. But to trust God in light is nothing. To trust God in the dark, now that is faith. So let's look again at what we just read. Why are the details about this census important? Because it actually shows us how in control God is. Look at verse 4. This verse tells us that Joseph had to go to Bethlehem for the census. And thus, Jesus would end up being born there. Why is this important? How does this speak to God's control? I'm going to give you 2 thoughts here. First, 400 years prior to Jesus' birth, I'm going to give you some Old Testament history here. An Old Testament prophet named Micah, in Micah 5:2, said these words, "In Bethlehem, you are small among the clans of Judah. One will come from you to be the ruler over Israel for me. His origin is from antiquity, from ancient times." So this prophet is speaking that there's going to be a Messiah that comes from Bethlehem 400 years prior to Jesus being there, which leads to this second thought. God, who is sovereign, in control of all things, even the things that we don't understand, sets in motion a plan that would bring all of that to pass. Now here's where the history comes in. History tells us that Herod, who was the ruler, was offended. He offended Caesar, who was above him. And Caesar, in his anger, tells Herod, we're going to no longer be friends. And then he calls for a census on the Jewish people to make matters worse on Herod. In all the regions, he says, I want you to take all the Jewish people and I want you to do a census and I'm going to impose a new tax on them. Here's kind of ironic It spent 10 years later, and it took 10 years before he even imposed this tax. He was just angry in the moment. So why is all this important? Why do the details of that story even matter to us? Because if we look at our current day and the time that you and I live in, we can be reminded that no matter what happens, and no matter how messy it looks, or even at times how out of control that it feels, God has a plan to bring about his kingdom and to see the gospel spread. Think about this. God used two ungodly rulers to have a fight to bring about a plan that he had prophesied over 400 years prior about Jesus. So that means God is in control. Everything that we're worried about, everything that is happening in our world, God is in control. And if God's in control, that means that we can make room for him. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, the familiar verse. Trust in the Lord with some of your heart, all of your heart, and do not rely on some of your understanding or your own understanding. In all your ways, know him, acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. So the second reason that some of us don't look for Jesus is we don't want Jesus messing with our plans. Most people, if we're honest, and you can raise your hand if you want, don't like their plans messed up. Is there anybody in the room that likes their plans getting messed up? It's like, I planned all this out and I want somebody to come through and knock it all down. Nobody. Most of us, if we're honest, we don't like things to get complicated or difficult. Now, I do know there are a strange group of people that live in our world that do like drama and do like difficulty, and they just have a thing for it. But most of us don't like that. And I don't think, if you look at this story, that it was Mary's plan A to go, let's have a baby in a stable. She finds out she's pregnant, she's all excited, and she starts Googling, where can I find the messy, dirty stable that can have a kid? Nobody's thinking that way. Now, I've heard this argument that if I invite Jesus into my life, that he's going to come and mess everything up, and he's going to change everything that I'm doing. And I'm not going to like that. Now, here's the truth. Yes, it's true that when Jesus becomes part of our life changes. Everything changes. The gospel of Jesus, his coming to earth, his death, his burial, his resurrection changes everything. He defeated sin and death because we couldn't. And because of that, our whole life changes when he's in it. History doesn't teach us that Joseph and Mary and Jesus were being rejected when they found no guest room at the inn. In fact, the original language points out that it means that there wasn't a suitable room for Mary to give birth. So I want you to think about this. At the time in an event like a census, a town would have what was called a caravan. I'm going to try to say this word. Caravanserai. I can't do it. A caravansary. There it is. I got it out. A caravansary, which is just a fancy word to say when a large caravan of people come to town, they would put them in one large room together. So I want you to think about this. This room here, all of us together, we travel as a caravan. We spend all night on the road. We come together in this room, and this is where we're going to all sleep together and hang out tonight. And one of us is pregnant and is going to give birth to a baby in the middle of the room with all of us to enjoy. So what the story is telling us is that wasn't a suitable place for Mary to have a baby. It wasn't that she was just simply being rejected and there wasn't enough space. It was just not suitable. So we all can get that. When Jesus, he opens our hearts to him, he's looking for a suitable space to bring new life and to break through the crowded mess of sin. He wants to take our dead and sin self and bring new life to us so that we can live free from sin. This suitable place can also speak to the idea that this new life Jesus wants to give us may work to humble you and I. And at times, it may even be messy, like a dirty stable full of animals. I mean, I don't need to ask, and you don't need to raise your hand of how many of us in this room acted like donkeys before we came to Christ. Now, I had the other word in here, but my wife told me it was not appropriate to say. But how many donkeys are in the room today? How many of us behaved that way before Jesus came in? Making room for Jesus messes up our plans and it messes with our lives, not because he's wanting to be mean to us, so that he can clean up our mess. If Jesus is to bring us to salvation and give us new life, we have to make room for him to mess with our plans and our lives a little bit. Or maybe, as my daughter, when she was 3 or 4 years old, would say, a lot of it. So some of us need Jesus to do a little bit, and some of us need Jesus to do a lot of it. Romans 8:28 says, we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. God has good for us. God's goal is not to come into your life and to mess it up and to make you miserable. No, it may feel miserable in the moment, and there are things that happen that we can't explain and we can't understand, but God's going to take that mess and he's going to make it good, because he has a kingdom that he wants to advance. He has lives that he wants to change, just like he changed yours. There are other neighbors and there are other friends that he wants to do that to, and he can't do that unless we allow him and make room for him. The third reason that someone is not looking for Jesus in light of Luke 2 is they don't want him to overstay his welcome. How many of you have ever had someone at your house that overstayed their welcome? Maybe it just happened at Thanksgiving. You had some relatives and they just wouldn't go home. That distant relative or that in-law that just lingers. Well, it made me think of a movie. Forgive me if this movie offends you. The National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation with Mr. Clark Griswold. And Mr. Clark Griswold has his family come into town, and his cousin Eddie comes into town with his RV. It's a very pretty RV. And they're hanging out in the house, and they look out the window, and Clark begins to ask him about that RV out there. And Eddie looks at him and says, now don't you go falling in love with that. When we leave here in a month, we're going to take it with us. To which Clark responds by throwing up his drink, realizing he's not going anywhere anytime soon. Now, I know none of you have family like that want to stay too long. And I know I'm making it a little bit light, but I want to point to something as I kind of wrap you around this, and that's that word guest, found in verse 7. All too often, we come to Christ and we have this new birth experience that we just talked about, but because we lack discipleship or a relationship with Jesus, goes no further than a guest. Jesus becomes someone we meet on Sundays for a little music and coffee, and then we head out the door and we come back next week. And the problem is Jesus doesn't want to be a guest. He wants to come into our home. And I know that some of us have used this line when guests come into our home is, make yourself at home. How many have ever said that? So I was actually talking to Jacob about this, and he said he had a friend, a minister, who came into someone's home, and they said, well, make yourself at home. And so he took a minute or two, and he looked around the house, and he's like, well, if I lived here, I would do this. And he started moving the furniture. And the person in the house was like, well, what are you doing? And you said, well, you said to make yourself at home. Well, that's exactly what we do with Christ. We look and we say, yeah, we want you to come in and we want you to make yourself home. And then he starts moving stuff. We're like, wait a minute. I didn't know you were going to do that. You're going a little bit too far here. So I want you to think about a couple reasons why we don't want to invite him in and we treat him like a guest. Part of it is, and this season really helps with this, is that we're just too busy. The holidays remind us that there's a lot going on in family and travels and shopping and all the different things and finishing up work projects before the end of the year. And it doesn't start this way. We're all kind of well-meaning, and we would never say, you know what, I'm just too busy to spend time with Jesus. We wouldn't say that with our words, but we let the demands of life overtake the time that we would be giving to him. Here's what I love about him. He's not standing there with his arms crossed, pouting because you didn't get up this morning and spend time with him. Nope. He never condemns us. He never has to, because we have an enemy and we have our own self that does a pretty good job of that. The truth is, we feel and see the results of our own neglect with time with him. Now, I have one of my children. I won't say their name because I didn't ask permission to talk about them today. But if she doesn't eat multiple times a day, she gets hangry And the level of her voice, because she's female, goes up to an octave that is not pleasant. And she actually will say to you, I'm not screaming, I'm not yelling. And her voice is up here. And she just needs something to eat. Nobody has anybody like that in their family, right? Do not point at your spouse if you want to go home without injury today. But you know the same thing happens, that you can actually become spiritually hangry? That you can fool yourself, like you miss one meal and you're like, I can get by till lunch and you're okay. And I can go maybe a day or two without abiding with the Lord. And you start to get spiritually hangry. And here's the pro tip that maybe you didn't know this, but everybody else notices it too. You're not fooling anybody. Like who you are without Christ starts to come back out again, and they start to see that you are spiritually hangry. So what does Jesus do with our busyness and when we treat him as a guest? Revelations 3:20 says this, see, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I'll come in to him, eat with him, and he with me. Notice that first word, see, looking for Jesus. Look, I'm right here. I love this idea that Jesus, when he plays the game of hide and seek, he's really bad at it. He's not hiding. He says, see, look, I'm right here. He's just patiently knocking, not like my 3-year-old who's banging on the door. Everything's an emergency, even though it's not. My brother looked at me weird. Not annoyingly knocking. And he's like, when you're ready, when you're reminded of what it's like to do this without me, I'll come in. I'll eat with you. Isn't that awesome? The second reason we treat Jesus as a guest is because, and this one's probably a little more fitting for some of us, is we're afraid he'll know all our business. You see, a house guest doesn't see all of the rooms. If you're like us in the holidays, you tidy everything up, you clean, and you close the doors to the rooms that you don't want people to hang out in. We do the same thing with Jesus. Here, Jesus, you can come into our living room. There's not much in here. It's nice and clean, but stay out of the other rooms of my heart. Jesus gave us a command, though, not just to help people see and come to Christ, but to teach them to obey everything that he commanded. That's discipleship. That's getting into the other rooms of our heart. That's where transformation takes place. This is the way that Jesus works. I want to show you an example on a story that happens later in the life of Jesus' ministry in Luke chapter 19. If you want to turn there, I'll read the story to you and become familiar who the character is. In Luke 19, verse 1, it says, he entered Jericho and was passing through. There was a man named Zacchaeus who was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was. There's that looking again. But he wasn't able because of the crowd, since he was a short man. So running ahead, he climbed up in a sycamore tree to see Jesus, since he was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, because today it's necessary for me to stay at your house. So he quickly came down and welcomed him joyfully. All who saw it began to complain, he's going to go stay with a sinful man? But Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, look, I'll give half of my possessions to the poor, Lord. And if I have extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay it back so many times more, 4 times as much. Today, salvation has come to this house, Jesus told him, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. When Jesus came and stayed, it transformed Zacchaeus' whole life. I want you to notice what wasn't in the story. Jesus doesn't come to Zacchaeus' house and he goes, man, look at all this stuff, man. You're a pretty greedy guy. You're hoarding all this stuff to yourself. Look, by the way, I need you to deal with this, and this. No. Just Zacchaeus being in Jesus' presence brought it to light, and it transformed him. That's what discipleship is. That when you and I learn to abide with him, he brings light to the darkness, and he begins to show us the things that Zacchaeus got into the presence of Jesus. Like, I can't have this in my life anymore. I need this to be transformed. And God's been dealing with some of you who have heard about discipleship. You've heard about us talk about that, and you've come as far as, okay, I've been saved and I've been baptized, but I don't know about them getting into the other rooms of my heart. And Jesus is speaking to us today, saying, today is time for me to transform you. I want to come and I want to stay. I'm not bringing light to things that are hidden in your heart because I want to upset you or hurt you, but I want to transform you. I want you to become all that I desire for you to be. Jesus not only wants to save you, but to transform you. Jesus wants to be more than a guest who overstays their welcome. He wants to abide with us and transform us. So we're going to do something this morning as you're there in your seat, and then hopefully you'll participate with me. We're gonna take these 3 reasons that you and I should make room for Jesus, and we're gonna pray through them together using the scriptures that I brought up for each one. And the first one, we're gonna go to Proverbs chapter 3. And if we're gonna make room for Jesus, we gotta let God be in control. And so I want to reread this verse to you, and I want to give us some direction as we pray together. Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not rely on your own understanding. In all your ways know him, and he'll make your paths straight. As we're coming into this holiday season, and we're hearing this idea that there are those who don't make room for Jesus, and one of those reasons is that we put borders around our trust. And we say, this is as far as God is allowed to go. And so as you hear that verse, it says that trust in the Lord with the things that I'm comfortable with. It's not what it says, does it? It says with all of my heart. So I want you to pray this with me. God, what is it? What is in my heart that I'm not trusting you with? Just right now in your seat, just ask him. You can close your eyes if it helps you not be distracted. God, what's in my heart right now that I'm not trusting you with? God, we played this game with our family that you read a sentence and you fill in the blank with a word. And so I'll read this to you that says, God, here is the thing that I'm not trusting you. Here's the blank thing that I'm not trusting you with. I want to give it to you. I'm going to ask that you help me to trust you. God, help us trust you. What is it? I realize that that's not easy to say, and you're in good company in the scriptures. There was a father who wanted to believe God could do something, but he struggled with his faith, and he said, God, I believe you, but help my unbelief. So even as you're sitting there, you say, Jonathan, I want to trust God, and I want to give him that thing, but I just don't know if I can. It's okay. Tell him that. Let's do that together. God, right now, we tell you, I want to trust you, but I don't have it all in me. I'm asking you to give me the faith to even trust you with this. And now I want you to think about this control issue that we all have. It's a human nature, and that is that we trust in our own understanding. Before we actually go to God, we exhaust all the resource of all the knowledge that we think we have because we know everything. We wouldn't say that out loud. And so what is it right now? Fill in the blank. What is the thing that you need to give up, that you're trusting in yourself? Is it, I got to be in control of what's in the bank account. I've got to be in control of my schedule. I got to be in control of this relationship or this conversation. I want you to think about what that is. And then in just a moment, together, we're gonna use these words. We're gonna say, God, I'm going to give it to you. And I want us to do that together. I want to use your voice, use your mouth. I know we're still maybe a little turkey hungover, but I want us to participate together. What is the thing that you need to not trust in yourself to hold and control that you need to give to him? And I want you to pray this with me. God, I give it to you. God, I give it to you. God, I'm going to trust you. God, I give you control. Now let's move to the next one. In Romans chapter 8, 28. If we're going to make room for Jesus, we got to let God mess with our plans so he can deal with our messes. Romans 8:28, I'll read it again. We know that all things work together for good of those who love God, are called according to his purpose. Right there where you are, you can do a quick inventory, and some of us can run very quickly to a place where it says, God, this is not good. I have this mess, and there is no way that I can see how you're going to take this and turn it into something good. God, this has been so bad. The situation has been so difficult. It's been so hard. I've made so many poor choices in this. There is no way that you can turn this around for something good. I want you to, some of us can already see that you didn't even need me to help you get there. Some of us, that's not the case. We've been there before. And what I want you to do, if you've been there before and you've seen God work, I want you to begin to pray for others in the room who are there right now. And I want you just to ask God, God, here is this mess. I can't see any way. I want you to, I have small children, so I have to do these kind of visual things. Can you see yourself just holding? Can you like make your hands in a thing like this mess that you're holding? And I'm asking us to be vulnerable. What's this guy doing? They don't let me speak every week. You're okay. I got this mess. There's no way I can see this turning into good. But God, your word says that you take all things, those that belong to you, which those who are his children, those who he has saved, those he's redeemed, those he's paid that price for, those he came for. He takes all that and he turns it into something good. So I'm going to take this and I want you to pray this with me. God, I give it to you, and just open it. I know that nothing's going to change instantly in this moment, but this is a faith moment. God, I'm turning this mess over to you, that you're going to turn it into something good. Now that means he may ask you to do some things. He may ask you to stop some things, say some things, pray some things, do some things different than you're already doing. That's part of the discipleship. That's part of letting him turn it into good. He may want you to spend some time with him and get into his word, and he's going to speak to you. And do the last one together, my favorite one before. And we're going to end a little different. As I pray through this last one, the worship team is going to actually close us out with a worship song instead of a worship host coming back. That's how we're going to end our service time together. In Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, see, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me. Where have you allowed God to only be a guest? Maybe you're being reminded that you're busy during this season right now and that you've gotten spiritually hangry and you need to right now take a mental inventory of your calendar over the next few days and weeks. Where can I readjust so that I can make Jesus a priority again, so that I can be in his presence and be transformed? Maybe some of us, you need to make a commitment right now that when this service ends, you're going to find Jacob or one of the other pastors or leaders, Pastor Matt, and say, it's time for me to be discipled. I need to let Jesus into some other rooms in my heart that I have kept him out of. I've only gone on the surface with him. And as we enter this season, there's somebody else that needs to know what we know. And our busyness may distract us from the opportunity God has for us to be able to share him with them. So I'm asking, God, I'm praying right now for each one of us in this room, wherever it is that we've allowed busyness or distraction to make us spiritually hangry, that you would expose that. And God, for some of us, I'm asking that you give us bravery today, that you would make us bold. Those that have been kind of afraid of the idea of discipleship because they don't want people to get into their mess. God, you came into a mess to clean up our mess. You were the leading example of this, and you didn't do that so you could make a shame of us, but that you could transform us. I pray that you would give boldness and peace today for those that need to say yes to discipleship. Father, I pray right now as we close out our time together, that God, that we would make room for you this season and that we would open up our hearts to allow you in. Would Would you stand with us as we worship and close today?